When I got to be chairman of the Seva Foundation, I said to them, do you think it's really acceptable when you're writing the World Health Organization to sign Ram Dass? I mean, you know, what are they going to think? We're kind of a Mickey Mouse organization. But I finally decided that it was all right to be the servant of God fully. I'm really enjoying it. So here we are. It's Ram Dass for better or worse. That's what we needed to begin. Some of you that are aficionados remember being here in Julia Richmond one night, I think the last time I spoke. And I came out to start to speak, and I was uptight for one reason or another, who knows. And to cover it, I usually have routines. And I started to cover it. And if you remember, somebody up there, after about 3 minutes, yelled, "Ram Dass, my heart hurts." And it cut through my bullshit so fast. It really brought us together, and it started the evening off. And it turned into a beautiful evening. Does anybody remember that? Those of you that have been traveling with me for a long time, you may be surprised at my new costume. I'm chairman of the board of the Seva Foundation, and this is as straight as I could get. This is traveling with me for a long time, you may be surprised at my new costume. I'm chairman of the board of the Seva Foundation, and this is as straight as I could get. This is take it off, it's the same schnook it always was. Oh boy, it's such fun to play all these games. It all seems real for a moment. What I usually do, and I don't assume this will be any different, is share notes of what's been happening. I always talk about myself, it turns out, but those of you that know that it isn't really me, it's us. I started to talk for the group, and in those days we all knew. You know, that was in the 60s and 70s. We all knew. And everybody didn't know, but we knew. And many of us knew because we had shared initiation rites, chemical or otherwise, mostly chemical. So I would tell a story about what happened to me, and everybody would nod, and I'd look over, and she was nodding. And I thought, how does she know? So I told a further out story, like the last time I was stoned on the beach in Mexico and standing by the ocean, and I lost my body and the thread broke, and she's going like this, you know. And I figure, maybe she's got a neck problem, you know. And I got absolutely obsessed with what was happening in her consciousness. And so I'd tell far out things and look to see what she was doing. And at the end of the lecture, I kind of looked at her and smiled and smiled. And finally, she came up to me. And she said, "Oh, I just want you to know, what you said was just fine. I agreed with everything you said. How did you know? What is it you've done that you can know these things?" And she leaned forward very conspiratorially and she said, "I crochet." That's when I knew that the game was bigger than I thought it was. And it turns out, if you look at the audience now, it is much more heterogeneous than it was in those days. And we're all gathered. I'm saying the same thing I was saying 20 years ago. And yet, here we all are hearing, and we didn't all come here through any one method. Isn't that far out? Just to think about that. Because in the 60s, we thought there was a method. And here we are in the 80s seeing that it's very overdetermined and that a lot of people are sharing shifts in awareness and are interested in consciousness and spirit for a lot of different reasons. Well, for those of you that haven't been to one of these before, I'll give you the quickest thumbnail sketch of why. In the 60s, in March 6, 1961 to be exact, Timothy Leary gave me psilocybin, and it changed my life. It changed my life in the sense that it undercut the models I had of who I thought I was. All the socialization and child development that had left me with a very strong somebodyness, it cut that out. And of course there was fear in losing that familiar identity. But there was always also wonder, because I touched a place in myself that it was behind all my social roles. And it was a presence. Instead of being good or this or that or achiever or anything, I experienced a place in myself where I just say, I am. Not I am this or I am that, just I am. And there were other qualities of that experience. There was a feeling of familiarity to it. It was a feeling, even though I had not been in that space since probably childhood before I developed my conceptual structures of mind, that place was extremely familiar to me. There was another quality to it, was that I experienced a quality of my heart that was incredibly compassionate. I looked at form as if I was standing behind the forms of the universe, and I looked out at the forms, and it was as if I saw the preciousness of all the forms, the incredible beauty of the stuff of life. It was like God's paintbrush at work. I looked at people and they were so beautiful. I looked at things and they were beautiful. I remember doing a book in the 60s with Sidney Cohen. He was the head of the government drug commission. He was the good guy and I was the bad guy. And we did a book together for New American Libraries called LSD. And we had photographs in it. And when we went to pick the photographs for the book, he picked all the photographs showing all these people on drugs kind of wiped out. And I picked all the ones showing people looking at flowers and roaming in the fields and stuff. And there was only one picture we agreed on. It was a picture of a guy lying on the floor looking at some spilled Coca-Cola. And he liked that because it showed that under drugs, people got so trivial and their minds got so caught in nothing. Now, in the course of that, I learned a lot of interesting things about coming down and getting high. And I think that this is familiar to many of you, but it's just a run-through of simple stuff, which was that what high means is free, and what free means is you don't stand anywhere. And you all remember my routine with the channels on the selector, where when you're on channel 1 and you look out at the reality of the universe, you see physical bodies, male, female, tall, thin, old, young, dark, light, etc. And then you flip the next flip and you see everybody as personalities, manic, depressive, hysteric, Achiever, mother, truck driver, social roles, all that stuff. Lawyer, achiever, eager person, responsible, irresponsible, laid back. You know, and everybody, most 99.9% of the world treats two planes as real, physical. Aries, a Leo, or Sagittarius. And now you look into the eyes of another person and you see another being just like you looking back at you. You can use any one of those channels. See, you get, as you go up the ladder, each channel you get to gives you more power than you had the one before. Because if you're a soul, you are free of, and you're not identified with your body and your psychological stuff, or even your mythical stuff, your astrology. You're free. You're looking around and you're sort of at play with all that stuff. Relatively free. But you're still busy being a separate somebody, a soul. And the secret of the game, finally, as I understand it at this point in my development, is that there is nowhere to stand. And I used to think for years that getting high meant getting rid of the lower planes and getting to the higher planes. Now I understand you only do that in order to realize that the lower planes are relatively real rather than absolutely real. But to be free, you can't stand in the higher planes any more than you can stand in the lower planes. And that came home to me in a very far out way. I have a friend who, when I've introduced this friend, I've always said this sort of thing, because most of you say you are not prejudiced people. And if I say I have a friend, you'd say I'd like to meet them if they're your friend. And you could handle any friend I could lay on you in terms of weirdness. Well, my friend Emmanuel hasn't got a body. See, and a lot of people say, well, I don't know about that. You know, I mean, see, well, he's my friend. I mean, it's not your problem, but I don't know whether you have imaginary playmates, but I do. I have lots of them. They enrich my life immensely. And Emmanuel has a great sense of humor. He's absolutely delightful. You remember when I asked Emmanuel, Emmanuel, I work with people that are dying. What should I tell them? He said, tell them it's absolutely safe. I mean, who wouldn't love somebody like that? He said, it's like taking off a tight shoe. Dying is like taking off a tight shoe. Because where he's looking, he did it already, and he's sitting around, you know, he knows. And he's saying, what are you making such a big deal out of the body? It's just an incarnation, no big deal. Well, what happened was that I had gotten, throughout those years, I was busy sort of putting down my physical body and my personality. I was so neurotic, and my body was not quite what I wanted it to be, and I just figured, I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to get high. And then at one point I said to Emmanuel, Emmanuel, what is my work? What should I be doing on earth? And he said, Ram Dass, why don't you're in a school, why don't you try taking the curriculum? He said, why don't you try being human? You know, I'd never thought of that. Because as far as I was concerned, my job was to push away my humanity and to get high. And I'd get high in any way I knew, and then I'd see it all, and I'd be wise and far out. And then I'd go back to my room, and I'd come back into my humanity. And I'd yick. And so I realized that that I didn't take an incarnation by error. In fact, there are no errors in the game at all. Not any errors in form at all. All form is lawful. It's all lawful. There's no errors. And what's far out is, as long as you identify with that part of you that is in form, you are merely a lawful happening. You can talk free will, but it's nonsense. That's not free will. That's all lawful unfolding. When you decided to come here tonight, that thought didn't just come out of the void. It comes out of this, which led to this, which led to that, which led to that. All your thoughts, your body, this is a 1931 model that is decaying in a perfectly lawful and orderly fashion. And as long as I identify with all of this, I am merely lawfully unfolding. And Emmanuel said to me, you have your choice. Do you want to be the victim or the creator? Because as long as you are the incarnation only, you are the victim. You are being had by the law. And you feel yourself caught in stuff that's just happening to you. You didn't ask for it. If you think you are the form. But if you flipped into these other levels of consciousness, outside of form, and met yourself behind form, which isn't describable. You can't say, I am a that, because that's a form. It's very frustrating. Because you can point at it, but you can't describe it, because every description isn't what it is. But as you begin to acknowledge that part of you that is not in form, and even to rest in it, you begin to experience what it feels like to be that which created yourself. Then there's only one of it, and it creates. It is creation by its very nature. You could call it God, or you could call it creation, and you're it. And standing nowhere means you are both the creator and the created. You are both the creator and the victim. And you stretch to be able to handle that incredible paradox. And you watch your own drama unfolding, and you are both in it, if you're accepting your humanity and taking the curriculum, as Emmanuel suggests, and you're not in it. That part of you that is not in it appreciates the perfection of the way it's unfolding. Now you say, perfection? Hey, man, look at the homeless. Look at the suffering. Look at the terrorism. Look at the bomb. Look at my stomach. Look at, you're going to call that perfection? You out of your mind? This guy, what a Pollyanna-ish guy he is. There's another paradox. The paradox is when you stand back and you look at the forms of the universe, you see law. And you see the law of karma, it's called, or there's the paradox. The paradox is that suffering is part of the plan of it all, and suffering stinks. And as a human being, you do what you can to end suffering because of the compassionate nature of your heart. At the same moment, you know that it's perfect, including your wanting to get rid of it. Can you hear that? It's a far-out relationship, and it's important because if you don't have that balance and you try to help people, you will burn out. There's no doubt about it.